To really wrap our heads around this system, let's start off with a quick thought experiment. Imagine two people receive the exact same amount of money. But there's a catch. One person gets it today, and the other person gets it a bit later, right after prices in the broader economy have already gone up. Now, technically speaking, sure, they received the exact same amount of currency. But economically, they didn't receive the same opportunity at all.
The economic reality here is pretty stark. Receiving money early provides this immense opportunity. You get to deploy that capital before the economic landscape changes. But receiving it late, well, that offers only diminished purchasing power. That money simply buys less than it would have just a short time prior. So the timing of capital acquisition is quite literally just as critical as the amount.
Now, let's take that thought experiment and apply it to the real world. When new money is created in our economy, the very first people to get their hands on it aren't ordinary workers. The initial recipients are banks, massive financial institutions, large investors, and huge corporations. In other words, folks who already own significant assets. And this creates a sort of hidden mechanism, one that quietly transfers purchasing power through the economy long before the average person even realizes the money supply has changed.
Section 1. The speed of new money.
You know, when people hear that a central bank has created new money, there's this assumption that prices just rise uniformly across the board. But structurally, that's a myth. Let's break down the literal cause and effect flow here. Imagine a central bank injects $1 billion into the financial system. Step 1, the injection. Step 2, financial institutions receive it. They can immediately use that cheap capital in Step 3 for asset purchases, buying up bonds, stocks, real estate, entire businesses. Demand naturally rises, and asset prices rise right along with it. But by the time we hit Step 4, the average worker hasn't seen a dime of that $1 billion. They're still earning the exact same salary, but now they're facing price inflation for basic things like groceries and rent. The new money travels, and the order in which it travels dictates exactly who benefits.
This foundational economic concept is known as the Cantillon effect. It's named after an 18th century economist, Richard Cantillon, and it defines this exact mechanism, where those who are closest to the source of new money benefit significantly before that inflation ever spreads to the broader economy. Cantillon observed centuries ago that inflation wasn't just a simple mathematical increase in prices across the board. No, it's an active redistributor of wealth that unevenly allocates purchasing power across time.
Section 2. Income versus assets.
Understanding this staggered flow of money reveals a massive, fundamental divide. Let's look at a concrete scenario to illustrate this. Say a central bank injects new money into the financial system. A large investor, who happens to be positioned close to that liquidity, gets early access to this cheap capital. They use that structural advantage to go out and purchase a commercial apartment building for exactly $10 million. Now, time passes. As that newly created liquidity inevitably spreads its way through the broader economy, property prices are pushed upward. That exact same apartment building, it might now be valued at $12 million. The investor just captured a $2 million nominal increase simply because they had early access to the capital. Meanwhile, the average citizen, who obviously didn't get that new money early enough, now faces significantly higher prices if they ever even try to enter the market. And it's really vital to point out here, nothing illegal happened. The system simply distributed the new purchasing power unevenly over time.
This analytically pits two classes against each other during any period of monetary expansion. On one side, you have wages. If you primarily earn money through a salary, inflation gradually just erodes your purchasing power, and your wages are notoriously slow to increase and catch up. On the other side, you have scarce assets. If you own things like housing, stocks, or land, your wealth increases in nominal value as that new liquidity inflates prices. This creates a really powerful feedback loop, where asset owners become wealthier, their collateral becomes more valuable, which then allows them to borrow even more money to acquire even more assets.
Section 3. The engine of compounding.
This feedback loop introduces us to the cold, mathematical reality of capitalism. Existing capital mechanically reproduces itself. Let's look at a standard 10% gain across a few different starting bases. If you own $1 million in productive assets, a 10% gain increases your wealth by a solid $100,000. But someone starting with $10 million, they gain $1 million. And if you have a base of $100 million, you gain $10 million. The percentage return is completely identical across the board, but the absolute outcome is vastly structurally unequal. When capital grows faster than an average person's ability to accumulate it through wages, wealth naturally concentrates.
And here's what is absolutely essential to understand from an analytical perspective. You don't need a conspiracy for this to happen. You don't need malicious, shadowy actors. For this system to produce unequal outcomes, you literally only need rational participants interacting. Banks lend money, investors seek returns, central banks step in to respond to crises, and individuals just try to protect their hard-earned savings. Every single individual decision makes total logical sense. But when you aggregate all these decisions together, capital naturally flows toward places where it can generate more capital.
Section 4. The passive investing shift.
We are currently witnessing another major structural transformation in how wealth concentrates. Just look at the automated feedback loop created by passive investing. Step 1, a company grows. Step 2, strictly because it grew, its weight inside an index naturally increases. Step 3, passive index funds are mathematically forced to automatically buy more of that company's stock. And Step 4, this blind influx of enormous savings mechanically drives the company's market capitalization even higher, which, you guessed it, increases its index weight again. Capital flows automatically to the largest companies simply because they are the largest.
This mechanical reality poses a pretty critical question. Just how much of today's market reflects actual economic value derived from human decisions, and how much is just being shaped by the rigid architecture of the investment machine itself? It's a structural loop that, while it isn't necessarily infinite or completely distorting, absolutely reinforces the concentration of capital right at the very top.
Section 5. The invisible concentration.
When we synthesize all of these mechanisms together, we're looking at a system with a deep structural tendency toward concentration. However, as financial commentators, we have to provide some analytical balance here. Reality is highly complex. The Cantillon effect doesn't mean inflation automatically makes all asset owners richer in real terms, just like passive investing isn't some secret market manipulation. The system is genuinely driven by extraordinary productivity. Technology creates real, tangible wealth. Innovation massively lowers costs for everyone. Markets rightfully destroy inefficient companies, and they reward successful entrepreneurship. And crucially, monetary expansion by central banks often serves as essential crisis management to prevent total economic collapse.
Therefore, simply asking, "Is the system rigged?" is far too simplistic of a question. It completely misses the underlying mechanics. We really need to reframe the core issue here. The much deeper structural observation we should be focusing on is this: how do the rules governing money and capital influence who gets access to opportunities first? Remember, money is essentially a mechanism for allocating purchasing power, and whoever controls or receives that capital early secures a compounding advantage.
These hidden systems operate quietly over decades, humming along through millions of ordinary transactions, shaping the distribution of wealth along very strict structural lines. So, the next time you hear that a central bank has injected new money into the economy, don't just ask, how much? Ask the fundamental question, where did it go first? Because in an economy that is built entirely around compounding, the greatest advantage isn't just getting more money, it's getting it earlier. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing the mechanics, and I'll catch you next time.